Good afternoon. We want to say hello in this last block of our seminar, Meet Days 2021, under the framework of Vigosur, Virtual Vigosur. At this moment, we will start the block of economic sustainability of the beef chain. Chile, with a small herd of animals, has been going along the right direction. The meat industry is a fundamental link for the stability of the sector. That is why we are honored to have the participation of FANACAR, Rafael Lecaros, who is the general manager, Chile Meat FANACAR. Opportunities and challenges to face international markets for beef out of the Chilean export chain for 2021-2022. Rafael, it's your turn and it's all yours. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it has been my privilege to talk about the meat export. The first thing to be able to understand the issue of the export of meat, we have to understand what we're offering. What is our offer? That is why I want to show you this very small graph or image where we are distinguished in the yellow as a country that has a mixture of meat cattle and dairy cattle. This characteristic, which is very special, and we don't see it in many parts of the world, as you can well see. It gives us certain challenges which are very important to go into the export world. One of these challenges, I'm going to explain what has to do with the offer that we give. We have 200 years of tradition. This is a livestock history from a long time. It looks like very strong, more than 200 years. We have 121,000 cattle farmers and around 3,250,000 heads. This comes from the inquest that we took in 2019. And this should be a little bit of the head that we have. How is this made up of? This population of cattle. We have 30%, which is specific for milk, Holstein, Jersey, or milk or crossed. And the rest have been growing very importantly in the meat, like the Angus and Hereford, about 20%. We see the existence of the bovine between 2007 2008 have been concentrating more and more in the Los Ríos y Los Lagos regions. And this concentration in that area also has a characteristics of growth, which is very important. As I was saying before, this kind of offer of double purpose gives us a very challenging situation here in Chile, which we call the cattling cycle. This is nothing more than the change of tendencies when the females are the same as the slaughtering of males. This is when we are emptying the wombs. And this gives us a cycle. This appears within 15 years, but as the information begins to advance more and more, and the market tendencies are much stronger, this goes between the bad news, if you want to call it that in spite of the changes of the cycle, the tendency that we have, the tendency has been going towards down. The export of beef, Brian, I'm going to stop here and talk a little bit more. The first thing that you see in this chart here, where we see the amount and the other are the values, show a situation. We exported many tons, and in 2020, 20,000 tons. So the growth, is practically 5 times more. 5 times in 5 years. This is a growth rate that is impressive in those that have grown the most in 2015, with the rest of America as the main buying customer, and Canada. China was the lowest, and it was almost insipid. The exports that we gave there, we began to have then in 2020, 20,000 tons, which represent more than 86 or 87% of the exports are going to China. It has its advantages, but it also has its disadvantages. So the interannual with China, here we have 60%. When we talk about values, the growth is 3 times more. It's a little bit less than the growth of volume because in general, the prices in China are lower than the prices that are being taken to other companies which are without bones or with some Chinese cuts. They are exporting, the complete animal. So it's meat with bones. So the average price is low. In the graph that you see on the bottom, you can see the same as the number, but you see in a more impacting way how that the blue color, which is China, is having a whole lot more importance in the exports. What are we exporting right now? It's only 12% of our production. We produce around 850,000 heads, which means around 200,000 tons of meat, and we are exporting 23 or 24,000 tons. So only 12%. And what this is telling us, we have room to grow. There are countries that are exporting the same as they import. In Chile, we can grow. We calculated with the problem to get a 40% of the production. And this we can achieve the most attractive prices in the export and in the domestic market, which besides this pandemic have been lower than the prices that we're bringing from Brazil or Europe and Paraguay. We are exporting the subproducts or the byproducts of the beef meat because the main exporter is ham, always Japan. The full value for the exporters in the first place. The next is followed by South Korea and then Hong Kong. These are markets that are very attractive. We are hoping, we just got doing this year or last year, the opening of the byproducts to China. However, the byproducts, like in other countries, are pending. Some of the byproducts which have the highest interest in China, which makes up the digestive system. And this has a high demand in China. And today they don't have a great destination to other markets. So we think that this will be a good contribution for the fourth to improve the value of the animals with this piece. In the next graph, I'm going to show you something that one of the most important. This is a graph which is showing the evolution of the bovine population. As you can see, these are standardized to the census, all of the cattle inquests that we do every 2 years, and they are standardized to this. And as you can see, we had 4,100,000 heads or a little bit more in 97. Then we started a tendency to go down. And then the exports, then we opened up 2001 and 2005. We began to have some importance. And in 2007, you can see a sustainable drop in their population until 2007. In 2006, 2007, the possibility of exporting to Europe was closed. So this changes the tendency of the view of exporting to the European Union. And this accentuates the drop of our population. And you see the numbers, which were really amazing. With it, we only had less than 2 million or 2,500,000 heads of cattle. And in 2015, the surveys showed a change in the tendencies of the growth of the size of the herd. And in the same year when we began the strong exports to China. So therefore, we think that there is a direct relationship between the exporting impact and the amount of animals we have. We must understand why did the exports grow in China? Veronica told us that we should give the vision of 2021 to 2022. And I think that this is the most important to be able to have a conclusion, to understand why this growth to China. The first step, the first comment that I can make about this is that the exporting growth to China is because China began to demand, because of their porcine African pests, which reduced their production of pork internally that they had in the country. And so they began to replace it with the beef. The consumption per capita in China has been growing every year of 13%, and we saw 3 kilograms per capita about 3 years ago in beef, and today we have 5. In the lamb, we had 3 per capita, but we're still very far of how much that they eat of the pork. It's to replace the low production of their pork meat. How can we face the growing consumption? This is something very important. The production of all of the meat in China is 77.4 million metric tons, where pork has 41 million, and the poultry 24 million, and the beef only 6.8 million metric tons in their production. The same, we only produce 200,000. It's 15 times more than what China is, less than what China is. 4.9 million tons. So this means that the export to China are 30 billion American dollars. This is what they have done in the last years. Here is a graph. You might not be able to see it, but it's very interesting. You can see where they have produced the export of the frozen bovine. You can see that Brazil in 2016, which is the light blue color, is the one that has grown more, taking an important part of the exports in 2020. Argentina has also expanded. Very good, maybe because of the growth, more than Brazil in proportions. In 2021, we have seen a little bit altered. Uruguay, however, had a growth, but it's ceding its market in 2020. And Chile, which is the red line on the very bottom, practically we don't even see them. We are very, very small. But every day you can see just a little bit more. But what it is showing that it's an interesting market, but we're still very small as far as the volumes towards China. The second thing, these are very important changes due because of the porcine pest. But on the other is the structural changes, and these structural changes I think that also benefit us, and it will show a little bit what are some of the future tendencies. The structural changes. China has a scarcity of agricultural land. You already know this. But also the urbanizations and the changes of the improvement of the logistics, especially when we talk about the logistics of purchasing and buying of meat, etc. They have more incomes. They have a very strong urban concentration, and they have a high demand for high quality food. Here you see a graph of how this has been transformed 2010, where 50% of the population were urban and 50% rural. In 2020, where 85% of the population is urban. And so this makes that their feeding habits have changed. The catalyzer of growth, we talk about the digital retail, the e-commerce, the social networks, and the mobile payments, and everything's being paid through the telephone. And also when we talk about the Z generation, which has more acquisitive power, they're more receptive to the different tendencies. You can see they follow the tendencies quite strongly, and they have a completely different habit or behavior of how they spend their money. They're more aware of the environment. How do we see the future for the beef meat in China? The offer or the production in China is very, very scarce. They produce a whole lot less than what they are demanding of the bovine meat, and because of the growth that they are projecting of what the consumers are going to use, their meat is not enough. The price of the Chinese bovine is twice as much as what is being produced in South America. The import grew 60% since 2016. It has a quincenal plan of producing the bovine cow. This is very, we can envy this and can give us a warning, but it should produce about 85% of what they are consuming. So therefore, the volume that they are importing might even grow more. The demand for the bovine is going to continue to grow, and also a growing demand for quality. This is very important. We as exporters to China, all of the countries have already started with the cow because it works as a replacement of the pork meat. As you all know, in China, this meat was chopped into cubes and they were eaten on sticks. Today, there has been a demand, and the experts said that this demand will continue as a Western meat. They want a beef steak. There is a growing demand for a beef steak with a good quality. What are the tendencies of the consumers? These are some of the changes that we see were structural, and that is why we can see with good eyes the export. The market, the Chinese market, the first information that we have of this survey that we did at MLA of the global consumer in China says that these are the elements which are highlighted that the Chinese are looking for. Here I marked some, which has to do with our cattle. It's 100% all natural. It's one of the first things that they have, that it does not have any added hormones, did not use hormones. The country of origin is one of the elements that they value quite a lot, and it has to be antibiotic free. And these are the other ones that you can see. And one of the most important things of the tendency of the consumer, they have already said this. Some of my predecessors who spoke this morning talking about the traceability of the market traceability. And with traceability of information given to the consumer, because the consumer is the one who wants to see where his meat is coming from and what that animal was fed with. In fact, even talking about the communities. This is a tendency which is changing quickly with the blockchain tendencies. They are giving this service to many communities where the consumer can see at the moment he is consuming, that all of the information he needs are relevant from him about even the meat that he's going to eat. China was the first. This is a little bit the message I want to leave with you today, but there are other markets that are coming along the same way and in that same region of the world. When you see or the power that China has had in the last 5 or 6 years, not only the Chilean exports, we saw that this was due to the Chinese exports mainly. We are seeing the very same tendency, the same movements that we saw 5 years ago, but we are also seeing it in Greenland, Indonesia, Singapore, and the Arabian countries. This is a region of the Pacific Asia, if you want to talk about like this. This is a region that is growing with important growth rates, important economic growth rates. But every day we're seeing a cultural transformation in the way that they are eating, in the way they immigrate. So this is a little bit of the message, and we are working with the sanitary opening to be able to have access to all of these different markets. And we are also working strongly with the foreign affairs minister. This is a new challenge that these markets recur, which is the religious certification. In this case, the Haidai certification, not just the Hadan in general, but specific for Malaysia and for Indonesia and other countries that we have to respond very quickly to be able to have access to these markets. As you know, Chile has been a state of the art for free trade commerce. We have very important treaties with Indonesia, with Malaysia. These are markets that are very open, but we probably have some limitations when it comes to the religious point of view and also for the sanitary opening. What do we need to do to take advantage of this unique opportunity? In my point of view, one of the unique opportunities that comes to my mind is speed. This is a race against time. All of the players are in these new markets. They start at zero. What do I mean by this? When you see, for instance, in Europe, you see that Argentina has a brand, Uruguay has a brand. They are recognized. They have a lot of value. But when you go to these Asian markets and you talk to Malaysia, for instance, this positioning of the big players does not exist. Probably the meat that has the highest value for them today is an Australian meat, which has a prestige, and ours, and the same as Argentina and Uruguay, are sold at an average price, as also the Indian meat, which is buffalo meat, which is sold at a more economical price. So we still have a lot of work to be able to have good prices. What should we do according to my point of view? We need to penetrate the Chinese market. We need to incorporate our byproducts. We need to go into new regions. China is so booked that it has culture inside its own country, which is totally different. It is a region that comes from times of old. There were nomad communities where had that totally different commerce. Talking about the north of China, and the other, we need to be closer to the consumer. And today in China, we are about 2 or 3 links away from the consumer. But the changes of the social networks has made this be a more traditional look, to be closer to the consumer. We are jumping a lot of steps very quickly. We are changing of instructing and for requesting. So we are new players in this market. And on the other hand, the difference and the diversification. The zoosanitary, the extensive pasturing system, the system of traceability, the purity of the water, pristine of the water, the quality, food safety, sustainability in the environment and the communities, animal welfare. And also Chile requires the very seriousness of their business, that they have to trust a lot. And so this is something that we can work on quite a lot, where we can be known We need to promote the Chilean meat. We are working in a sectorial brand which can be present in all of the markets in a strong way. We have been doing virtual fairs. We've been trying to conquer these markets that are so big. And just as I said not a few minutes ago, this is like a new market, and that is why it's a race. Who's going to conquer this market first, or who's going to position themselves in the Chinese consumers' minds? We're also getting to know they're just recently getting to know the beef. We need to show them the sustainability of our sector, and this has no possibility of getting away from this. I'm not going to talk so much about this because we saw this quite a lot today, but this is something that is going against us is the lack of information, and we need to be very awake, very aware to know how to position ourselves in this. And finally, we need to identify with the origins. Here I'm going to leave you some pictures. All of us who are in the Southern Code, we know how wonderful the area that we live in, but obviously for these countries to see this is something that really impacts us. And the last thing I want to say is we need to work together. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Rafael. Very clear and beautiful, your presentation. We have some questions that have arrived in our chat. We want to remind all of those who are attending, all of those who have any questions or doubts, or maybe even want to have a point of view that you want to express, or maybe even ask to our expert. You can ask your question at the chat that is on the bottom part of the screen, please. The question said, even though it is very clear that China is the style and the low prices, what are the other markets looking for, like Europe, with the higher prices? How can we arrive at this market? Here, there's a question, very clear, Veronica, that you asked me. Maybe I didn't want to put it in my presentation. The European market is a very attractive market. Maybe the Argentina and Uruguay, if we can talk about this later, but we are not players in the European market for two reasons specifically. First of all, we are the only country in South America that accepts the use of growth promoters, and the European Union is the head of not accepting the growth promoters. They had a war with the United States, and there they had 481. And so that's why the European market, if we look at it with a lot of attraction, because it could bring us to 5, 6, or 7 different cuts of the animal, but this would be 50% of the value. And China, in response to this, is a market that even though it pays less because it takes everything. It takes the bones, it takes the meat, which is very different, makes a different price to the meat in the same cut. So it's an export market in a country that if we were a little bit bigger, the idea would be to sell to each one of the markets the cut that they would like and the one that pays the most. And this would be like the dream of a small and medium-sized company. But Chile is still very small. And since we don't have a market like Europe, which is attractive to separate certain cuts, it's still convenient to sell the whole animal to China. Thank you so much. Here's another question related to the traceability process. The experience that you have had in the last year, you can see that there is a higher tendency of using the records correctly of the animals, and then you can have a better offer to the exports. Of course, Veronica. The traceability issue is due to the pandemic. The traceability is what makes the difference between being a player in the exporting market and not being a player. This is a very important work that SAG has done, even though they've had some difficulties. I saw that the director resigned, talking about the platform when we talk about traceability, but undoubtedly we cannot just stay here. We need to advance that we saw many years ago when we had the first cases of the foot-mouth disease, of the crazy cow disease. And without other things, the demand for generating the Generation Z, they have to have the traceability taken all the way to the consumer. Once again, this is a challenge. Thank you very much. We think that your presentation has been very interesting. Always the aspects of the market are fundamental because they pull the complete chain. So we have some very good news in this sense. Being careful of how we accompany this with the production so that the industry can express this potential that they have in different markets. Thank you so much to all of the companies that are associated so that these results can be fruitful, and hopefully the next meet days you can tell us how are the new markets that you are seeing the prospect at this moment. So I'd just like to mention a small thing for all of the audience. As I said at the beginning, one of the challenges that we have is the viability of the exporting offer when we see this cattle cycle. And in this sense, we think that it's very, very important to have a more close relationship with the market or with the dairy producers to see especially how we can give a better added value of the dairy calves, yes. Because this way we can keep an exporting offer and not so much come and go of the meat. This is something that we talked about last Thursday, but we agree with you that this is an issue that is very, very important due to the breeds that we have in our country. So this is a challenge. In each sense, you're giving us challenges. So thank you so much, Fanica, for your presentation. We're going to separate this minute for just 2 minutes to be able to go to the next presentation will be by the president of Fede Ganadera. We'll be right back.